everyone, and welcome to this masterclass on energy. I'm delighted to be running this session for you. I hope that you'll enjoy this masterclass and get involved by submitting your questions throughout. The first thing I want to do is set out the aims of the masterclass. So, by the end of the masterclass, you should understand what a career in energy and natural resources is really like, have a clearer idea of how energy legal issues relate to M&A, commercial contracts, and disputes in trading, and feel confident in knowing how to break into and succeed within this practice area. We'll come back to those aims in just a moment, but before we kick off with our panelists, I wanted to go over some house rules. First and foremost, please use the online question tool to pose any questions you have, and Neve will be posing them to our speakers throughout the presentation. The earlier you send in your questions, the more likely you are to get a response. Please also use the chat tool to let us know if you have any audio, visual, or any technical issues, and we can do our best to help you. Please note that this masterclass is being recorded. The recording of the session will be sent to all registrants after the session and will be available on YouTube very shortly. And finally, please feel free to post about the masterclass using the hashtag #LCNMasterclass. Okay, I'm going to start by asking all attendees to answer the question on the screen, which I'm just going to launch now. Okay, so we can see that a lot of people are postgraduate and in work, and we've also got a few second and third year students and a few non-law students as well. So which will be great to help our panelists understand what stage you're at. Right, so now we're ready to get this masterclass underway. I'm going to pass over to my colleague Neve and our panelists.
Thank you so much for that, Ellie. Hello everybody, my name is Neve Gray and I'm running the masterclass today, as Ellie said. So I want to start off by getting our panelists to introduce ourselves. So Ben, if I could start with you, can you just tell us a little bit about yourself and your firm, please?
Yeah, of course. So my name's Ben Thomson. I work in the energy sector at Ashfords. I'm based in Exeter, but we do also have offices around the country, including London. I am within the commercial department at Ashfords. So even though we have a broad energy sector, which encompasses lots of other departments within the firm, my role is commercial. So essentially think draft and negotiating contracts. And I've been doing that for about 4 years now. I did train in corporate, which is slightly different, and without an energy focus. So for pure energy, yeah, I've been doing that about 4 years now.
Brilliant, thank you very much, Ben. Ellie and I are actually also both from Exeter, so nice to have you here. David, same to you, please, a little bit about yourself and White & Case.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. My name is David Murray. I'm an associate at White & Case, working in the energy and project finance practice in the London office. White & Case has a market-leading position in projects, energy and natural resources in London. At White & Case, I really focus on project development, M&A in the energy sector. I've been living in London for about 9 years now. Before White & Case, I was at another city law firm. And then before that, I worked in-house at Equinor, the Norwegian state energy company.
Thank you very much. David, you kind of touched on my first question there when you said that you work a bit in M&A, but basically, can you explain to the audience here today what energy as a practice area encompasses?
Sure. So I think because energy as a sector is quite broad, I think the areas of practice themselves are quite expansive. And as a lawyer focusing in the sector, you would have an opportunity to develop a very in-depth knowledge in very specific areas of, say, commercial, regulatory work, disputes across, I'm going to try and avoid using too much industry jargon, but I would say the entire value chain of commodities in the industry. And what I mean by that is whether you're focusing on renewable energy, oil and gas, petrochemicals, really the beginning of the project until the end of the project in the sense of upstream, midstream, downstream. And so I think because of that, there is really, frankly, a lot, and it's really exciting to be able to explore each of those different areas. And I think further to that, the nature of the work that you yourself will be exposed to is highly dependent upon basically the law firm that you work for, or if you work in-house, what that particular business does. And it really depends upon the business model of that organization as to sort of the level of exposure that you get. But the wider area is quite expansive, so it's really exciting in that sense.
Thank you very much. Ben, so as David was just saying, it's a very expansive area. So for instance, David is more development and finance, whereas you are on the commercial team and I believe have a focus on waste sectors. So to you, what is energy encompassing for you in your work?
Yeah, no, I mean, obviously David is spot on. It's very broad. I mentioned in my intro that I'm in the energy sector within the firm. But, you know, the firm is split into departments. So planning, real estate, employment, construction, etc. But if you are within one of those departments, say construction, commercial, you can then work within the energy sector. You know, have it noted, I'm interested in energy. I want to focus my work on that. And yeah, touching on David's point, energy can include, for example, oil and gas, which we don't do a lot of. Our work is 95% renewables, I mean 95%. So wind, solar, etc. And yeah, a bit of waste as well. So it kind of ties in, and it'll I'll talk about this in my case study, but we do quite a lot of energy from waste plants. So, you know, preventing waste going to landfill and recycling it instead.
Thank you very much. So that is the sort of broad spectrum of what energy encompasses. How we're trying to break down this masterclass for all of you at home or at your uni, wherever you are at this moment, is we want to define energy as a practice area and then do a bit more of a deep dive into the work that both Ben and David do specifically. But let's get a little bit more of an overview of clients. So Ben, can we stick with you? Who specifically might be some of your clients in this area?
Yeah, so the majority of our clients should either be funds, so investors or asset management companies who will hold portfolios of, say, energy from waste plants or recycling plants, etc. And will act for them if they want to buy some new energy assets or they want to sell existing assets. You know, we acted for a fund earlier this year selling 5 anaerobic digestion plants just because it wasn't part of their strategy anymore for renewables. And then on the other hand, you've got developers, so people who are looking to basically start up a company and start a renewable energy project. So quite a few developers who think, you know what, I want to start an energy from waste plant. How do I go about that? What's the, you know, first steps? Or people who want to seek planning permission for wind farms or solar farms or battery storage.
Thank you. And David, what about you?
Yeah, I think the sort of the client, I guess the range of clients is similarly broad. So depending upon where you're sort of how you're actually looking at a project, if you're looking to develop that or sort of buy in or divest, clients are typically international energy companies, state-owned companies, national companies and governments. On the lender side, we work with a range of banks and lending institutions, and then also commodity traders as well. So it really is quite a mix.
Thank you. How much do your clients sort of change depending on what's going on in the world at the time? So Ben, you said that you don't really work with oil and gas companies a lot, but presumably for those who did, they'd have a much larger focus on them sort of within the last year. So do your clients kind of shift with what's going on in the world, or are they pretty much, you know who you're expecting to work with?
They do shift. Yeah, they shift massively. You know, for example, there's an energy subsidy regime which is changing and has changed over the last few years. So, yeah, just thinking of quite an easy example off the top of my head, there's been a boiler upgrade scheme, for example, recently to encourage people to use air source and ground source heat pumps. And if a client thinks, oh, there's a market for that, because the government is providing the subsidy, is providing the grant, great, let's get involved with that. If that grant is taken away tomorrow, then, you know, there's suddenly less incentive for them to get involved with it. And let's say a Labour government comes in the autumn and they change the rules on onshore wind farms, well then we'll see a lot of our clients, existing or new clients, come in and say, great, the planning has been relaxed on building new onshore wind farms, let's get into that market. So it does massively shift based on what's going on.
I'm really glad that you brought up the possibility of Labour coming in at the next election, because David, that's what I wanted to ask you about. You said that you work with governments. Do you anticipate the possibility of working with governments sort of a lot more in-depthly in the coming year after the election?
So I must confess I don't really do any work in the UK and not much work in Europe. So it tends to be outside of this country. But
there are quite a lot of elections coming up worldwide, right? So possibly somewhere you work.
Yeah. I think we'll touch upon this in a few different areas of the presentation. The industry itself is incredibly volatile just by nature of the actual substance of what we're dealing with. And the industry has had to, over the last few decades, develop around that and basically be able to develop projects that have 20, 30-year lives in circumstances where at best you're facing an election cycle, at worst you may be facing regime change, and you kind of as an industry have to react to those changing circumstances. So it's I think unlike a lot of other sectors, the energy sector is actually quite well positioned to manage itself as everything changes around it.
Thank you very much. David, I'm going to stick with you for this next question, which is, how has your impression of energy as a practice area changed since you started working in it? Because obviously you did work in the energy sector outside of a law firm and then came into it. What's your kind of general perspective of what's going on in the industry?
Yeah, so I think I guess my perception of it will sort of change depending upon really the environment that I'm in. The work that I do now is different to that which I did at my previous firm, and then different again to what I did in-house. So I think one's perception is really shaped by that. The energy sector itself has fundamentally changed, even in the last 5 years. We are talking about things now which just didn't exist 5 years ago. So it's really exciting in that sense to see that, the nature of really even the projects that we're developing are just sort of very, very new. I think the firm recently developed the largest green hydrogen project in the world, and with the financing for that at least, and that wouldn't have been spoken about 5-10 years ago. So it's interesting. It's a very dynamic space.
Thank you. And then Ben, what about you, kind of coming from trainee to associate? How has your perception of industry changed? And also, I guess, how's your work changed from trainee to associate at the firm?
Yeah, so just in terms of kind of what sort of things we're seeing, I mean, and David is right, and that's a big point. Is the proliferation of green or clean hydrogen? I mean, that's certainly a lot of the industry chatter at the moment is unlocking a lot of investment for hydrogen, trying to roll it out on an industrial scale. And I suspect we'll see a lot more of that over the next few years. In terms of the last 4 years, I don't know, it's difficult. I think generally, like David says, it kind of is just people's minds have been a bit focused on renewables and ways to generate energy. I think there's a lot of funds, for example, like asset managers who might not have wanted to hold a lot of assets in the renewable sector or in the waste sector, and have looked to diversify their portfolio by doing that. So it's certainly basically just become a lot more ubiquitous, I think.
Thank you very much. The students that want to come in to this area, both of you kind of sit in different, so you sit on commercial teams or you sit on finance teams rather than specific energy teams. What can people who are coming to do their traineeship, what seats should they be looking at if they're interested in doing energy? David, can I ask you?
I would say the department that I work in. So that's the Energy Infrastructure Project and Asset Finance Department, or IPAF. Lots of firms have basically the same practice. It'll have a different acronym, but that, I think, is the place where you would want to be doing your well, selecting or requesting a seat. Whether you get it is, I guess, a separate question, but that would be the area of focus. Yeah.
And Ben, I'm guessing you will say your own current seat as well. Do firms have particular energy seats, or is that maybe less common?
So within my firm, that is the energy department. Yeah.
That is, yeah.
So,
yeah.
But I think it depends where you are, what the focus of that particular firm is.
Okay.
Yeah, it very much changes. I mean, we're a regional firm, for example, so there's no energy specific seat. It's within a sector, but you could choose from a number of seats to be within it, but there is no energy seat as such.
Okay, so it's important that students are doing their research for the seats that would touch on energy work more specifically.
Yeah, I suspect a lot of firms will structure it very differently, so it's important just to kind of check and see how each firm does it.
Okay, thank you very much. Right, I want to kind of get into a bit more of the nitty-gritty, go into some of your work more specifically. So, Ben, how specialist is the area that you're working in? Are you kind of exclusively always working on energy projects?
Yeah, pretty much. And kind of my stage of my career, 6 years qualified, it is about kind of making that focus for myself as well. Kind of, driving myself into doing energy focused work and saying to partners, this is what I'm interested in, this is what I want to do. But yeah, I think because of the nature of the area, because you do have to learn quite a lot about the energy sector and all the jargon, etc. I think it's quite important just to have that as your main focus. Within energy itself, it does change. So we do have renewables, solar, wind, but also waste. So under the umbrella of energy, it's quite a lot of different work, but I tend not to do any non-energy work.
And Ben, I'm going to stick with you. So what is your kind of favorite specialty within energy? What projects excite you most?
I do like work on anaerobic digestion plants. So just to introduce that term, if anyone's not familiar with it, you basically stick some organic matter or animal waste, etc., into a plant. And so anaerobic is just without air. So you just stick it in this big plant and it creates a biogas and also creates a digestate, a biofertilizer. And it's a way of making sure food and other types of waste don't go to landfill. So those are probably the most interesting things for me to work on because it's quite a big project. It's something that takes a number of years to get from inception to close. And I'll talk about it in my case study, but it basically encompasses a lot of different types of work as well, which is very interesting.
Okay, brilliant, thank you. And David, what about you?
So I think one area that I focus on in particular is where, particularly in upstream energy projects, companies will be looking to buy or sell their interest in upstream license fields. And it's really a process of, well, basically negotiating that and then also managing towards the lending, how you go about procuring financing for that project, or if we're acting for the lenders, looking back into the project and seeing what you would expect from a bankability perspective in order for that to be viable, and then also seeing how that project can fit within adjacent projects in order to, and I'll use an industry term here, provide a route to market so that basically the project can actually be viable and the shareholders and their lenders can get a return. So it's within one specific project, you can really see just an interesting life cycle of M&A activity, project financing, project development, all self-contained within the same area. So that's really quite exciting.
Thank you. I want to keep carrying on with the excitement of energy. So obviously, I feel as an outsider, like maybe this practice area has become more and more popular in recent years. You know, people are much more concerned about green energy and things like that. So David, have you seen kind of a bit of a shift? Is this the up and coming sexy practice area to be a part of at the moment?
Well, for me, it was always the sexy practice area. But yeah, I think that's right. I think there is a lot of attention on it, and I think I think in sort of the national consciousness in say UK, Europe, it's very much an area of focus. It's basically in the papers every day because we've had a war. There's the cost of living is obviously very much front and center of people's minds. But the energy industry, I think, has always been a very dynamic sector, and there's a lot going on. I think the interesting thing about working at a firm or a company within that industry is understanding where that particular company or firm sees itself at the moment and sees itself in the years to come, because you can't apply like a cookie cutter mold to each of their business models. They're all very different. There are new actors in the sector now which weren't there 5-10 years ago as well. So I think for someone looking to enter the industry, it's worth doing your research and seeing like, well, what actually is this company or firm doing now? Where do they want to go? And in the case of law firms, how are their clients changing over time? And specifically within their clients, what are the clients doing differently? Because everyone's sort of reacting to different things and proactively seeking certain opportunities. Yeah.
No, brilliant. Thank you very much. Ben, David kind of touched on there things like the war going on and also the cost of living crisis. So my question is, have you noticed sort of this crazily big shift in the last year of drive of energy? And are there, crazy peaks where you will have to be stuck at your desk forever, and then, the next month or the next year things will have calmed down? Or is it kind of a constantly very busy practice area?
There's definitely peaks. Yeah, there's definitely periods where it's a little more intense than others. But I touched on earlier, it is a lot of our clients, I guess, tend to be reactive in many ways. Reacting to latest legislation or reacting to a government announcement, etc. It's kind of following that and following the market as to what they do. So we do see a lot of clients talking about I touched on earlier onshore wind and kind of having that in the pipeline and thinking, okay, we've got that as kind of ready to go, but let's see what happens with that policy wise, just in case planning restrictions are relaxed. But I don't know. I guess it is quite steady, to be honest. Like I said earlier, something like an energy from waste plant is something that takes years to get from start to finish. So within that project itself, there's very intense periods. But yeah, you wouldn't be starting a new one of those every day. So yeah, like the old saying, it's very much peaks and troughs.
No, thank you very much. What's the typical team setup like? Dan, I'm going to stick with you kind of on a case. How does that kind of vary depending on what you're working on in case of sort of like size, personnel? What's that like?
Yeah, I mean, the energy sector itself at Ashfords is very big. It's probably 35, 40 lawyers across different departments, and different partners within that have their own specialisms. So we do have one partner with a specialism in offshore wind, for example, and you might find yourself aligned with them on a project if, for example, he just happens to have a new developer who's come in and got the planning permission for offshore wind. Then you're working on that for a couple of months. Whereas the partner I work under mostly is waste, energy from waste. So in terms of the work itself, yeah, I do find myself kind of moving between those partners. Again, at my kind of career level, I think it's about kind of carving it out for yourself, you know, making it known to people exactly what type of area you're interested in. So yeah, I guess it's kind of about finding a way for yourself.
Thank you. David, I'm actually going to draw on that, carving out a way for yourself, for my next question, which is there might perhaps be, for people coming in as trainees or associates, maybe clients that people are less keen to work on because of how they handle issues relating to energy. Do you find that that is a common thing? Do you find that that's an accepted thing if it is common, like not wanting to work for an oil company perhaps?
I think part of this, this is partly why it's very important to sort of get a sense of the industry and exactly what you would like to do within the industry. And as I mentioned, you know, different law firms have different focuses upon how they see their clients and how they see their relationship with their clients developing over the coming years. So I think certainly sort of doing your research in that respect. I know, you know, White & Case and many other firms in the city have really a very strong and sort of quite heavily developing practice in emerging markets and renewable energy sectors in those areas. And it's, yeah, I mean, the client base is frankly quite diverse in that space. So it's, yeah, I think, yeah, it's worth doing your research about what you would like to be doing.
Thank you. To everyone at home, I am going to be coming on to a bit more of breaking into the practice area and perhaps where you can be doing that research in just a moment. Just got a couple more questions on this, and please do make sure to keep sending in your questions. I can see them all coming through. We will get to the Q&A portion, so make sure they're all in and you don't miss out. Ben, I'm going to come to you. How does your practice area typically engage with the rest of the firm? Do you tend to, you know, does your team tend to work quite independently, or are you constantly collaborating with teams in different departments?
Oh no, they're constantly collaborating. Yeah, definitely. I mean, yeah, it just touches on so many different areas. I mean, even thinking about litigation and contentious work, there is some contentious energy work out there. So where you know, challenging a decision made by Ofgem, the energy regulator, or you know, you don't get the subsidy that you think you were going to get, challenging that decision. Or just disputes under power purchase agreements or supply agreements, things like that. So yeah, it is very broad across the sector and across different departments. You know, touching on the energy from waste plant example, that is something we could not do without input from planning, from real estate, from construction. So yeah, it's very much a cross-team endeavour.
Brilliant, thank you very much. And then David, my last question from this area is, it was how international is the work you're doing, but you mentioned that a lot of the governments that you work with are international. So could you kind of talk a bit about how much of the work you're doing is a mix between domestic and international, who kind of your international clients encompass, things like that?
Sure. So I think working in this sector, yeah, I mean, specifically the work that White & Case does, it's very exciting to be able to sort of work on projects overseas. Most of the work that I do is in West Africa and the Middle East, recently in other countries as well. As I mentioned before, I unfortunately don't get to do much work within the UK, but we certainly work for British companies and British investors and lenders, or indeed clients with London offices as well. And then I think another really interesting aspect of the work is having exposure to other offices. We work quite seamlessly across different offices, and it's very normal to build a team of a couple of associates, supervising partner, and a trainee across different offices. So typically London, the Middle Eastern offices, Joburg, Paris. We often all work together on sort of a single matter, and that I think is at a more junior level in the practice can be actually quite an interesting point of exposure to a world which you might not otherwise see.
Brilliant, thank you very much. Okay, we're going to come on to breaking into this practice area to help all of you at home know how to get us in there. Ben, my first question, I guess, is did you do law at university or were you a non-law student?
I did law at university.
Okay, and David, same to you? Do you also do law?
Yes, I did.
Okay. Ben, what seats did you do when you were a trainee, and then how did you kind of discover that this might be the area for you?
Yeah, so I mean, doing the law degree, I mean, firstly, I had one of my neighbours was a criminal barrister. I had these grand dreams of protecting people, going and doing criminal law and being a barrister and all this. It didn't quite come to fruition, but that was the reason behind the law degree. And then trained at another regional firm actually, and did seats in real estate, medical negligence, corporate commercial, commercial real estate and private wealth. So nothing within any of those seats would have touched on energy. I actually worked at this firm in the corporate department for 2 or 3 years. And I just found that the nature of the work I was doing was quite broad. It was a corporate team where you could be working on, let's say an acquisition of an insurance company one week, and then the next week or month you moved on to the sale of a, I don't know, it could be an energy company. But I think the point I'm trying to make is that you kind of just do so many different things. There wasn't time to kind of focus and specialize in a particular sector. So I found this job at Ashfords advertised online for an energy specialist commercial solicitor, and I thought, perfect, that's great. That's something that interests me. It allows to specialize, and that's really what I wanted. I wanted to become, an expert on something. I wanted to absorb as much information as I could about the energy sector and where it's going. And when people ask you, and hopefully people ask you, what's it like working in energy, and what's the energy market looking like, what's going to happen in 2 years' time, that you'll be able to kind of talk through that and give people an answer. That's really what I wanted, and I found in the other practice area I was in, I didn't really have that. It was just kind of a broad jumping around from different types of businesses to another.
No, thank you very much. David, your route into law was slightly different. So you mentioned you worked at Equinox. Was that the name of the place?
Equinor, yeah.
Equinor, sorry. So what I want to know is what kind of sort of skills and experience did you gain from that, and then why make the move into law, and what do you now prefer about being here?
Right. So it's a slightly unusual path, but perhaps not all uncommon. So I didn't actually do a training contract in sort of a typical sense. After I graduated from law school, I moved to Oslo in Norway, worked for Equinor. I was there for about 18 months before moving to London. And that was a really interesting experience, obviously living in a foreign country, but also having exposure to a company like that. I think it is a different, I mean, looking at the trainees that I work with, I think it is a different experience. You get I think an exposure to the business, which is really important in a sector like this, where we, as Ben said, use a lot of industry jargon. There is, even on the lawyers, there is an expectation that you at least have some understanding of like basic engineering, economic and commercial concepts, which is perhaps sometimes unfair sometimes, but it really helps to have that exposure inside a business. So I think that is that is a slightly unusual route, but I think it's worth people bearing in mind if they want to, say, maybe think about doing an internship or something at an energy company, or once they get to a firm doing a secondment. I think that's a really valuable way of understanding the sector more generally.
Fantastic, thank you. Ben, I'm going to come back to you. What are the kind of key qualities that you think make a good energy lawyer?
Well, I think firstly, you've got to have the interest in it. I think you've got to have the desire and interest to learn about the energy sector. Like David said, our clients expect us to know about the sector and yeah, to know in depth about them and what they're doing and kind of where the energy sector is heading. You know, if a client says, I've got this energy project which is going to generate 5 gigawatts of energy, you know, you should know whether that's a lot or not a lot. So you've got to have that desire to keep wanting to learn about it. And, you know, it is obviously changing all the time. So I think you've got to have that drive and desire. But then otherwise, yeah, the normal skills that would make a good lawyer. So attention to detail, organization, etc. I think with this, it is just more about staying on top of sector developments and making sure you kind of keep on top of what's going on in the energy sphere.
I'm going to follow up with you on that and say, where do you recommend students doing that research, or any resources that you'd recommend, you know, other than kind of keeping up to date with the news? How can students develop that interest in energy and keep up to date with what's going on?
Yeah, it is hard. I'm not gonna lie, it is tough to do that because, you know, I'm sure a lot of people on this call might have Googled energy news or energy business, etc. And then there's so much out there, you kind of don't know where to start. Yeah, it's tough. I think it's difficult because we're exposed to it every single day. I come in the office and people are talking about energy development, so you kind of learn and pick it up in an office environment. I think look at gov.uk, kind of business and energy sector publications and their website. Look at what legislation is going through, you know, the concrete stuff, because obviously there's a lot of noise out there about what could happen or might happen. But yeah, I, unfortunately, it is kind of a bit of a minefield out there. I think just kind of be wary of distinguishing the cold hard facts from what is kind of more politically motivated news. And yeah, stick to the kind of the bills going through Parliament, stuff like that.
Okay, brilliant. Thank you. David, I want to pitch to you the idea. You're at an event for White and Case, a student comes up to you, they want to know more about the energy sector. What questions should they be asking you to kind of get a real idea of what the practice area is like in your firm?
Yeah, so I think it's worth asking, you know, who your clients are. Like, ideally they should probably do a bit of research before asking the questions, but yeah, ask who the clients are, how their clients are reacting, how the firm's clients are reacting to changes in the energy sector, how they are themselves looking to develop, because lots of our clients are proactively seeking to diversify, consolidate, focus upon different sectors to sort of respond to what they want to do as a matter of corporate policy. Getting a sense of what is really expected of associates within that practice. I think that's maybe not said enough. That it is quite a it can be quite intense, and sort of I think having a certain degree of commitment to the role is really important, and I mean it's very rewarding. But I think getting a sense of really what the work is going to be like is very helpful. And then I would say, yeah, just getting a sense of, well, what projects the firm is most proud of in the last 6 months. I think that would give you a good sense of what they're doing.
Brilliant, thank you. I like what the firm's most proud of, actually, so it's a good one for students to steal. Ben, I think this might be a good time for you to do your case study, if that's all right.
Yeah, no, absolutely, of course. So I thought it would be quite useful actually to talk through kind of the life cycle of energy from waste plant, or more specifically anaerobic digestion plant, because a lot of the case studies, of course, anyway, we have to anonymize. So if I kind of take it through what a typical energy from waste project would look like, I think that would be quite helpful. And then hopefully people can see how that involves other departments and other teams. So yeah, essentially, X client, a developer, their main business is securing finance, getting funds for setting up energy projects. So you might have a specialism in trying to get planning permissions for offshore wind, or that might be solar panels or battery storage. Developer in this instance wants to set up an energy from waste plant, anaerobic digestion plant. So you're basically looking to find organic matter, put it into the plant, break it down, and create some byproducts, which will help basically A, recycle that product, and B, create a gas, create a secondary product which can be used to generate energy. So first things first, the kind of golden tickets you're looking out for in these situations are A, planning permission, which is normally pretty difficult to get because you've got to have somewhere to put the plant, and B, a connection to the grid. So you've got to have somewhere where you can put that energy, electricity that you generate, and at the moment, it's very difficult to get a grid connection, and the grid is over capacity. So those are the kind of two things you're looking out for. And once you get those, you're then helping the client bring that project to life. So you've got to build the thing. So construction team comes in and deals with the construction contracts. They come in and draft the build contract, design contract, operation and maintenance contracts. Planning team are obviously there working alongside them on the planning permission, making sure you meet any requirements or criteria within that. And then at some stage, us as the commercial team will get involved. So the person owning the plant would not necessarily the same person who runs it, but the person who owns it will be looking for something to put into it. So we call that feedstock. So that tends to be kind of crops and things like that, stuff that you can burn fairly easily. So yeah, as a commercial person, you're dealing with the supply agreements to that feedstock. You're dealing with supply of power, both into the plant and out of the plant once it's generated. You're looking at how do they get rid of all the waste product from the plant. So you'll draft agreements to do with that, normally called digestate offtake agreements. And it's a big project where you're kind of trying to make sure that all of those parts fit together. So hence working with the other teams and making sure there's a, it all fits together, the interface of it. And yeah, I mean, things change during the course of that project, but those are kind of the core key documents and things that you're working on. And the typical process, like I say, for that would normally be a couple of years, 2.5 to 3 years to get something from planning permission all the way to actually running and operating the plant. And then once it's actually running and operating, us in commercial and the construction team will still continue to have a role, because this plant doesn't just get going and get running and that's it, they're all done. It obviously needs to be maintained. You need to make sure there's still a supply of energy, a supply of feedstock, maintenance of the boilers and the heating system, stuff like that. So it's a continuous ongoing project that involves multiple teams across the firm. And yeah, I guess if you're working within the energy sector at Ashfords, you've got to find which team you'd prefer to be in for that. Do you prefer the construction side, planning side, commercial side? And yeah, you've got a project to work on for the best part of 2 or 3 years, if not longer.
Brilliant. Thank you very much for that, Ben. So it sounds like quite a lot of energy issues are quite long-winded and can kind of still be in the background years after they're completed almost.
Definitely.
Okay, guys, we're going to be coming to your questions in just a minute. I just kind of wanted to quickly touch on some of the issues impacting the sector right now before we come to audience questions. So for those of you who haven't sent your question in, now is your kind of final chance. David, so much has been going on this year, as you've kind of spoken about, and also quite a lot to come within the next year. But what are kind of the main issues that people in your practice area are talking about at the moment?
So I think I touched upon it at the beginning. I mean, the war in Ukraine has had quite a substantial impact upon people's lives generally, but also within the sector. I think in terms of energy development within Europe and the UK, just as a result of what that war has done to financial markets, the cost of borrowing has gone up quite substantially. Projects that would otherwise get developed or refinanced are having to look at other routes, other options. At the same time, European governments and North American governments are under a lot of pressure to ease the cost of energy, but at the same time, developers are expecting basically government support in the form of feed-in tariffs or similar. So trying to get that mix right is I think a challenge that has impacted upon certain aspects of the industry. That also feeds into really what our clients want to pursue in terms of their own strategy. So if you're a government or a company that has operations in the area neighboring Russia, you may want to sort of actively diversify your routes to market so that you're not relying upon basically a pipeline that goes through Russia, for example. Like there are, so it's really interesting in the sense that certain events can actually have impacts upon different areas of the industry in ways which are not new. Like this has been going on for a very long time, but it is very relevant right now. I think it's impacted upon really a lot of aspects of our business.
Okay, thank you very much. Ben, you kind of spoke about some of the resources that students can use. So let's say students have taken your advice, they're reading a document on what's going on in the energy sector right now. What specifically are they supposed to be looking for? What questions should they be asking themselves when reviewing sort of the latest trends or changes?
Yeah, I suppose always ask who is benefiting from this. Who is benefiting from the article, kind of the spin it might put on the story, or B, who is going to benefit from the project in question. Like David says, is the aim to reduce energy bills for people by easing that supply chain? Who's it for, basically? Is this project or is this new piece of legislation or these new regulations, is it for a lender? Is it for the consumer, the individual at home? Is it to boost a political party's standing or reputation? What is the goal of this, and kind of who is the beneficiary? We've had just for example, we've had a effective ban on new onshore wind planning applications since about 2015 in this country, which it may be suggested is not entirely a decision taken for the benefit of renewable energy. Who is that actually good for? I think those are the questions you have to ask.
Brilliant, thank you very much. Okay, we're going to start going on to some audience questions, and Ben, I'm going to stick with you for this first one. So sure. Megan has asked, what advice do you have for an applicant who has a VAC scheme interview next week and wants to work in energy?
Okay, yes, I'd say definitely learn kind of what the key factors are, what the key issues are in the UK at the moment. It is very difficult because, I think, drawing on what David said, we're kind of coming at things from a different perspective, he and I, with the more international focused work that David does, whereas us are more focused in the UK. So I'd say learn what that firm does, learn where their work is and who their clients are. They will publish their recent deals and clients on their websites, and they are proud of that, like David said. So kind of make sure you look at those, but also, learn what they are. Is that firm acting for big oil and gas producers? Are they specializing more in wind and solar? Are they acting for big banks and lenders, or are they acting for smaller developers? Kind of get a sense of where they're coming from. Are they acting for a farmer in the southwest, or are they acting for the government of Dubai. I mean, you've got to get a sense on the size of the firm and what they do.
Brilliant, thank you very much. And David, do you have any other advice for people who perhaps have interviews coming up, even more general advice?
Well, I think I think sort of try to relax during the interview. It can be quite daunting, but I think it is just as much an opportunity for the firm to show themselves towards you as vice versa, and hopefully you have an opportunity to attend some of the events that the firm holds with trainees or associates, so that you could actually ask some questions, maybe some that you're not comfortable asking in an interview setting. Ask them in that forum. But yeah, I think it is a very important stage in your life and your career, and it's important that you feel comfortable knowing sort of what you want to do with your life, and so it's, yeah, I think just kind of don't be shy about getting a sense of what you really want to do with that.
Brilliant, thank you. And David, someone else has also written in a question for you. So Shahida has asked, apart from White & Case's international power, what else makes the firm unique from other firms in the energy sector?
Okay, so I think what the firm has really benefited from is, I mean, they've been in London for about well over 50 years, I think, at this point. So even though it's notionally a US firm, I think the practice in London is very cemented there. I think having the ability to also work with, as I mentioned, different people in different offices and build upon their various areas of expertise is really helpful. And I think seamlessly working across different offices and different practice areas is something that we are quite fortunate to be able to do. That's not always the case with firms. So having that degree of really in-depth knowledge across different areas really is quite noticeable for clients. Yeah, I'm not sure if that answers the question.
Thank you. Ben, Mubashir has asked if, oh no, sorry, this isn't from Mubashir. How would you recommend doing research into a firm's energy sector in terms of, does your firm run events or talks that people can turn up to? Can people reach out to you on LinkedIn? I mean, obviously you've got sessions like this where we're delving into the sector, but where's the best place to kind of come and be able to maybe talk to the firm about the energy sector?
Okay, yeah, no, we definitely run events and presentations quite regularly, often a careers fair at the University of Exeter or other universities. Yeah, we are on these types of panels with lawcareers.net and similar quite frequently. So, but yeah, I mean, absolutely, if anyone wants to reach out on LinkedIn to me at all, I'm more than happy to take questions on there and just discuss the energy sector. Yeah, I always do think, people ask me that quite a lot, and I always think there's no particular harm in writing to someone at a firm or just sending an email and asking about the firm or the energy sector or the opportunities available. Because I know people aren't always comfortable doing that, but I do kind of always think, well, what's the harm? And the worst is they don't reply. But it does show a little bit of initiative.
No, completely. Don't ask, don't get.
Exactly.
Ben, I've had a question from David, I have a question from a career changer, which says, what advice would you give to someone who is looking to make that career change? So they've got an interest in sustainable energies, they would like to come and pivot into a law firm in that area, but they are not currently working as a lawyer. What advice do you perhaps have for them?
Yeah, so I think that background is very helpful for the reasons we mentioned, having an interest in the sector. So I think, you could certainly approach law firms in the sector, or indeed in-house departments in energy companies as well. I wouldn't discount that. I think one thing to really sort of get a sense of is what the law firm is doing within sustainable energy, because that is itself a very broad area as well. So if you would like to be doing particularly stuff within the domestic market, there are certain firms that do really mostly that kind of work, and then there are projects internationally which, because of different aspects of their structure and sort of the arrangements in relation to, say, for example, the financing and pieces like that, which would be doing sort of more international work out of London typically. So I think getting a sense of where you would really like to go, and maybe perhaps use the expertise that you already have, would be very useful, and I think firms would be receptive to that.
Thank you very much. Ben, this is now a question from Mubashir, who asks, we've spoken a bit about the current trends and things that have been going on in the sector. Could you give an example of something specific that has had an impact on your work in the last year? Other than suddenly being very busy.
No, quite a lot. We've had a significant increase in work in regards to offshore wind, particularly in Wales, like huge increase in that amount of work. Yeah, we've seen, like I mentioned earlier, there's that boiler upgrade scheme, which has been quite a lot of work for developers. We've seen quite a lot of local developer clients getting more involved in anaerobic digestion, for example. There's an opportunity for that, I think a lot of developers feel, because basically the Environment Act that came in 2021 is making separate food waste collection mandatory now for councils across the UK. So they've got to find something to do with that. All this food waste that now has to be separated from other household waste. I think a lot of developers have seen an opportunity for anaerobic digestion there, because rather than taking it to an expensive landfill, why not put it into an anaerobic digestion plant? So we've seen a lot of increase in that type of work. But yeah, generally, I think like our funds clients and developer clients are kind of acting off the back of political uncertainty as well. We don't have enough time to talk about all of that, but grid connection is an issue, grid capacity, planning restrictions are an issue still on onshore wind. So yeah, a lot of our clients are trying to navigate that, and a lot of our advice as well has been regulatory. How do we keep up with these changes? How do we deal with new energy subsidies, etc.? So yeah, there's a lot going on.
Thank you. Okay, I think we've probably got time for one final question. So David, this one is for you from Basilios. I hope I pronounced that correctly. And they've said, how do you make sure that a client achieves full compliance on regulatory issues?
Okay, on regular. Okay, so I would say compliance in the energy sector is, it's a very broad thing. We could be talking about environmental compliance, or compliance with basically financial requirements if they're looking to commodity trading, compliance with regulations associated with ESG, human rights, sanctions, all those sorts of things. We, as a firm, offer advice or provide advice in relation to all of those sectors. And as primarily a transaction lawyer, I have to, obviously you can't be a specialist in everything, but you do need to have an understanding about certain areas and understand, okay, this is a point where we need specialist advice on a particular point from our team, and the environment team or regulatory team, and I think having that kind of sort of knowledge is very useful to be able to identify specific areas for that, and that is something that the firm does help you develop over time. And to be honest, it just comes over time. But as a junior lawyer, you would never be expected to be basically the gatekeeper between the client and a regulatory violation. So that would never happen. So but it's interesting to know that everything kind of feeds in together.
Brilliant. Thank you very much, David. I'm going to say thank you so much to you both now and pass back over to Ellie. But David, Ben, it's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you for being here today. And I'm just going to pass over to Ellie for the final bits.
Great. Thank you so much for our panel for taking part in the conversation and for the audience for joining us today. We hope you found the session informative. I'm just going to launch a final poll to give us an idea of what your key takeaways were from the session. Just going to give a second to... Great, thank you for that. It's great to see what some of you have taken from the session. Before you go, just another reminder to attendees that we'll be sending out a link containing the recording of the session, so keep an eye out for that. A survey will also be popping up once this masterclass has ended, so please fill that in to let us know how you enjoyed today. Also, just please register for our next masterclass on the SQE and social mobility with BPP University. You can do this via the link in today's follow-up email. Thank you so much once again to our panelists and everyone attending. We look forward to seeing you again next time. Remember, all of our masterclasses can be found on AllCareersNet's event page. Thanks.
Thank you very much both for joining us today, and thank you everybody else. We will see you next time.